Hey parents, today I want to talk about something that we're super passionate about, and that's speech delays and speech challenges, especially when it comes to those really tough cases, those speech apraxia struggles where they're not even reaching that major milestone of speech at all. And what parents often struggle with is, why is it happening in the first place? I'm Dr. Nicole, and we're going to talk about two major things when it comes to speech apraxia and speech struggles. First off, we're going to break down speech in a really simple way. I'm not going to oversimplify it, but we're really going to break it down into understandable parts, and that's because we need to understand the components of it, what or where the jam up is, understand why there's a struggle so that we understand what needs to be brought online to help your child. And as parents, you want to understand, why did it happen in the first place? So we're going to cover all of that. Secondly, later on in the video, we're going to give you parents some surprising information about why this is happening in the first place and how you can spot the early signs so that you can really get ahead of it. So let's switch over to the iPad right here and really dive into how speech works through the three components of speech. Now, remember how the nervous system works, and I start with the nervous system because it's literally the thing that controls everything. And when we're talking about struggles with speech, a lot of times in the land of speech, OT, PT, we're talking about motor. We're talking about the muscles that control speech. We're talking about the motor tone. Is there too much tone? Is there not enough tone? Is there a disorganization or altered tone? But really what is deciding or determining the muscle tone is the neurological functions and neurological structures that control those muscles, the nervous system. So in order to have a conversation about motor tone and motor function, we really have to know about that neurosystem at the root of it, because that's what controls the motor tone and motor function. Now, the very first thing that starts speech is what's called perception. And perception is easy to understand. We could also call it input. Right here, input. And with so many kids, it's the biggest thing tied to struggles in speech. When we're talking about speech delays and apraxia, we're also talking about sensory processing disorder. And you may be asking, what does that have to do with apraxia and speech delays? Well, the reason I bring sensory processing up is that it's an input or perception problem. The sensory processing integration system is having a difficult time. It's malfunctioning, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, that input to the system. Next, or second, is coordination. And coordination is all about, taking in all of the auditory information and processing it, and then using that information from the environment inside the nervous system, inside that brain integration center, and processing it, and thirdly and finally allowing output to occur, or speech. In other words, execution. Now, what I want to bring your attention to is something that happens in between steps 2 and 3. And now, the way I like to understand it and teach parents is that we really can look at all three of these components separately: input, coordination, output, or perception, coordination, execution. But what we really need to do is understand the formation of speech, because a lot of parents and a lot of therapists even, they see that their child is easily connecting what's going on around it. In other words, the input is there. But the thing that you're seeing is a jam up right here at this formation or execution output part of the speech components. The auditory and environmental sensory information is actually coming in. Parents will say, it's like they're trying to get the words out, but they just can't, or it's not smooth, it's not coordinated, they just can't get it out. And that's another thing with speech. It could be not only a jam up at the execution where speech is not coming out at all, there could be speech challenges or speech impediments. So we have to consider that maybe the challenge that's actually causing the inability to output at all, the apraxia, not being able to smoothly or fully speak, is actually not happening just here, but it could be happening in between this 1 and 2 spot, 1 and 2 step. So in neurology, we have a word for that called diaskesis. And diaskesis means that the nervous system could have an injury, could have a problem, could have a disruption or distortion in function in one place, but the symptom or the impediment, the challenge could be showing up somewhere else. And what we find when we're doing our testing with kiddos with speech apraxia, speech challenges, speech delays, is that the real challenge of the nervous system is one step up in the ladder. There's interference between that perception component and that coordination component. If you alter coordination, you're going to alter execution. A lot of times where different professionals are focusing on is they're trying to improve the output or execution, but they're missing out on where the challenge is actually rooted in, and that's between that perception and coordination phase. And to really improve step 3, we have to go back up the ladder and see where is their interference. Okay, so that's the first part of the conversation with speech delays, speech apraxia, but there's one more bit of information that we need to go over to really round out our understanding of what's going on and why it's going on. Now, that is, where did it go sideways in the first place? The single most biggest thing or missing link in speech delays and apraxia and honestly in a whole host of neurodevelopmental sensory challenges for kiddos is birth trauma. Now, what stinks about the traditional medical approach to speech delays, sensory processing, autism is that they're just saying that it's just bad luck. But there's something that's happening that's connected to so much of what's going on here during the pregnancy and birth process that neurologically is very connected to all of these struggles, and I want to walk you through a couple of them. So the number one thing that we see all the time in our practice, and they're all different, but we're going to lump them all under the same umbrella, is cord wrap, breech, and vacuum extraction, or vacuum extraction delivery. And these almost always guarantee speech delays, and it really increases the chance of speech apraxia. The second most common thing that we see in a child's case history that will cause speech delays and speech apraxia is forceps or manual extraction. And the third thing that we find that sticks out like a sore thumb in a child's case history with apraxia or speech delays that no one else is connecting the dots for parents is C-sections. Now, this whole time we've had these two things sitting right here waiting for us, and I really want to get into this C1 and C2 conversation. So we're going to take away the iPad and use our hands to visualize and understand what's going on. When we really understand birth and literature behind it, they refer to it as augmentation. Now, birth intervention or birth augmentation, what it does is whether it's a big set of hands, it's forceps, it's vacuum extraction, it's causing tension, pressure, and stress to this upper neck region. Add on top of that cord wrap, breech, or induction, that's going to cause a lot of problems. And what it does, it significantly alters the neurology, the air traffic control, the master control system up here where the brainstem sits. Where the doctor puts their hands, their devices, their tools, that's exactly where the brainstem sits. That's where the occiput, the atlas, and the axis vertebrae sit. And these upper cervical neurospinal regions are the most important, delicate, non-protected parts of the body for a baby. They've been in mom and there's no gravity in there. So they haven't learned how to hold their head up and neck up. They haven't learned how to protect it. And that's why after weeks and even months after, everyone says when you're holding a baby, protect or hold the neck and the head. This is the most easily injured, easily damaged, easily altered area of the body for a baby. And what happens is the function and movement of these C1, C2, little bones, all the nerves that come out of it, all the muscles, it's that perception and coordination location for speech. It's also the perception and coordination of the neuromotor, neuromuscular function to latch and how we feed muscles of the jaw and also the vocal cord. So this area should absolutely be in the conversation when we're talking about speech delays, speech challenges, and speech apraxia, because all of the nerves to all of this comes from this brainstem region. So there's something called subluxation. Subluxation alters alignment, which creates fixation and tension, and that alters the neurological and neuromuscular function. Now, when you have subluxation, it creates muscles that become constricted, tense, tight, and that's when you get too much tension and coordination, confusion, and When that happens, speech gets really hard. At the worst of it, that's when we don't get any speech at all, apraxia, and we get a more mild and moderate, that's when we see those speech delays and speech impediments. So the number one trigger and causative factor for subluxation in this area is birth intervention and birth trauma. Now, this area, or the brainstem area, is very important for speech, like we talked about, but it's also really critical for other things like sleeping, digestion, immune function, sensory processing. All of that combined is all stored up right here. And the nastier the birth intervention, the tougher and the more gnarly subluxation that sets up shop. So that's that 1-2 punch that leads to altered speech, speech delays, and apraxia. The physical, neuromuscular, and neuromotor function in this area dictates the perception, the input, the coordination, the formation, the output, the execution of speech. All the nerves that do the big and the granular parts of speech all live and come from this area. That's why the most likely missing link for your child that's continuing to struggle with speech challenges, speech delays, and speech apraxia is a trained, neurologically focused pediatric chiropractor. If you haven't had your child assessed for subluxation, for that perception, that incoordination, and that altered tone of the nervous system and the neuromuscular system, I highly suggest that that is put next to do on your list. The coolest thing that pediatric chiropractors do is find those subluxations. We locate it, we measure it, we quantify it so that we can really create a custom care plan for your child for their unique struggle. And the absolute coolest thing is seeing your child under neurologically focused chiropractic care so that we can restore communication, restore coordination, restore that balance and perception and that function of the nervous system to everything else, including that neuromotor, neuromuscular system. That's why when we get kiddos under consistent neurologically focused pediatric care and they go back to their PT, their OT, their speech therapist, they start seeing leaps and bounds and all these gains that they hadn't even unlocked yet. We work hand in hand with these therapy teams, and we love to see that they love to see all these improvements, growths, and gains once the nervous system is functioning the way it was designed to do. Once we get rid of subluxation, the shutdown is removed. They start seeing so much improvement in every single therapy session because the subluxation is no longer there and no longer setting up shop. Subluxation is shut down. Shut down nervous system, shut down neuromotor, neuromuscular tone and function. Subluxation is that thing that's causing that interference, that jamming up that we talked about earlier. And neurologically focused pediatric chiropractors are the only ones trained to correct subluxation. Every child needs a pediatric chiropractor on their team. So if your child has apraxia, speech delays, speech challenges, please reach out to us. We would love to help. Please share this video if you learned something new, if you know of a child who's struggling with this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.